Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Um, my name is Nasrin Jahan. I am the lead UX designer in the digital services team at Mayor's office. Joined the team this year, March, but it feels like longer than that in a good way. Before going to usability testing, I want to highlight the agenda of the meeting today. We will have an intro about usability, and then we will walk through you with a case study, a very unique case study we did with the Office Department of Transportation Special Event Permitting team. We actually learned a lot from that project. So let's start with what is usability. We probably don't think often about usability until we have a problem with using a product. So it determines how user friendly the product is. My all-time favorite is the example of door. I don't think we think about door often until we actually encounter a door which is like have a label say push and pull. I love the doors where they don't have any sign and it just do the thing that I want to do. If I want to go through a door and push it and it opens, that's the best design for me. So let's look at a simple product here. This is very simple, intuitive. If by the look of this, you can tell this is a cat feeder. And when someone designed, they actually, put some accent like to make it obvious that this is for cat, not for human. Let's see what happens when cat actually cats are using this product. Definitely not expected because all the cats are like it's cats behavior. This is definitely not pleasant while eating, like if someone is if another cat is on you. So it's important to remember, like keep in mind while you're designing something, of course the design has to be simple enough to be useful, but at the same time we have to keep our users in mind because we are not our users, even though we often forget about it. But as a designer, a lot of designers actually um, follow this philosophy. They keep reminding themselves we are not our users. In my previous office, I had a big sticker in my desk that we are not our users, just to remind ourselves. If we look at the picture next to this text, it tells everything by itself. There is a nice paved pathway which is meant and built for walking. However, we can see on the grass there is a natural path that people made, which was more convenient for people to walk and probably shorter distance if we keep looking at the path. So that determines the behavior of the user. So the question is how to know your user. And one of the method is usability testing. You can do usability testing in any time in the process of building a product. For example, when you are in ideation phase, you can just test an idea. And as you go, if it's a digital product, you can do high fidelity or low fidelity prototype. There are so many prototyping tools that you can use, including Figma, Adobe InDesign. There are so many tools. So it depends on what you want to use or what is convenient for you using it. I think the technology is the least part. Your intention is to understand your users. For example, if you're testing a browser-based application, if you observe their scrolling behavior, where they're stopping, and just also the eye tracking, you will know where they're looking, what component is actually drawing the most attention. You can use that spacing to put that information that you want people looking for or would be helpful for, like an action button. So I'm going to present this case study that we did with special events permitting team at DOT. This is actually really, I would say it's an eye-opening experience for me for several reasons. Let's just dip into the problem statement first, and then I will come to the point like what was unique about this project. In DOT special event permitting team, their job is to approve event permitting, meaning there are so many events happen in the city, but it needs some regulation. Depending on what type of event residents or organizations are planning and what type of equipment they will be using, there would be some, they might need some kind of assistance from the city. For example, if it's a big crowd like Artscape, it doesn't just happen by itself. It needs some planning and maintenance. The city has to keep in mind the safety and security of people. So they need to involve police department, fire department, a lot of things. And to do that, they have to know the availability of those departments. So that's the reason the permitting is important. And they also need to make sure that like too many events not happening on the same day because we have limited resource. So for that purpose, the permitting process is really important. The struggle is that all the forms, they need to fill out some forms, just not one form, depending on different events like block party or like private, birthday party at park. So there are so many parties, or like public events, like again Artscape or Flower Mart. There are like so many different forms needed to fill out. It required applicants know a lot of information, and based on that fill out the form. And most often, the biggest pain point for the admin, applicants did not fill out the form, like all the forms. If they don't fill out all the forms, permit technician cannot process the application. So in that case, what happened that there was a lag time, and sometimes they couldn't get the license, like the permitting license ahead of the event time, because it needs time to go through all the department and get the permit. So there was like both way pain point for the admins and the applicant. So to address that, there was actually, like when there was the paper-based form, there was a checklist in the side that applicant had to, this is the checklist you're seeing, applicant had to download, and then based on what they have in the checklist, the required item when required, and yes and no. So people used to go through this checklist and mark it yes and no, and based on that, find the form from the browser or website, download them, fill them out, and then take it to the permitting office. So we came to know that this was helpful for a lot of people, but it still had some pain point. For example, what you were saying, don't have to know all the details, but this was the type of form, the knowledge you need to know to fill out those forms, and to know what form you need to fill out. So when we did the heuristic review, we found that there were too many forms, and applicants required to remember a lot of information, details about their events ahead of time, which basically rely on their memory. And then even with the checklist, they need assistance from the DOT permit technician, schedule a call and understand the checklist, and then based on that, they find the form and fill out the form. So we thought that we had a couple of ideas to improve this checklist process, because clearly checklist was one of the items that people were using. And we thought that, how about we improve this? And, but how do we improve this and it works, right? We don't want to be the cat case. So we decided to do usability testing on the new design. I'll come to the new design in a minute, but just to give you a glimpse what we're going to talk about the usability testing case study today, there are of course, these are the steps you need to have, must have thing that to perform usability testing. First of all, you need a prototype. What are you going to test? And then, of course, you have to have a testing plan. This is very important, because regardless how small test you perform, planning will help you and save you so much time. And who will be your participant? You want to test with a right participant. And then the next thing is that performing the test, and then analyze the test result, documenting and reporting your findings. So let's get to the prototyping. This is a prototype. As you can see, the paper-based checklist transformed into a digital checklist where we have multiple checkboxes. This is actually long, but I couldn't give the whole view. You can see that this is a live prototype, and there are 3 columns. First is when it's needed. It's about the form. And the second is yes and no. Some of the, depending on yes and no, you have to check the what's needed. For example, if you can see, The second question here, are you applying with a nonprofit partner? And if it's yes, you have to have a copy of nonprofit 501c3 status document. If it's no, then you don't need to have it. People need to fill out this, and then it enable the button, and then the applicant can proceed for the next step. Planning the testing, you have to remember a couple of things. One, who are your participant, and you have to, for performing the test, you have to have a participant, a facilitator or moderator, and occasionally note taker. I skip the note taker here because it's not mandatory, especially if you're a small team and you were for the first time you're doing taking. I would say not to stress too much about taking notes. If you have a bigger team, of course, have a dedicated person to take notes. But mainly, you have to focus on your participant and facilitating the testing. And remember, if you're recording, take consent. It's very important. You have the testing guide. The testing guide is basically the list of what you're gonna test, like the scenarios, how many tasks you are testing, that kind of thing. And also the most important, other important part is the device. If you are testing a mobile app and you have a prototype for for a laptop, that will not work. So think about where you're testing. Let's look at the information flow a little bit, like how this goes. So there's this participant part and the moderator part. And of course, in the middle, you have the device. So what happened that as a facilitator, you will start conversation and give the participant some task. They will try to perform the task on the device, and then they will give feedbacks. As a facilitator, your job is to listen to them, observe to them, and if you have question, you will ask question and probe more, dig deep into, like, what's happening and why it's happening. 5 is a magic number. It's a lot of organization who are not into usability testing, or like trying getting into usability testing, think that have, like, they need to test a lot of people because they have so many users. But basically, if you can test like 5 people, you will start seeing pattern. And according to Jacob Nelson, they're Nelson and Norman company's a founder. So they do a lot of research, and they, based on their research, 85% of problems can be solved by testing with just 5 users. Think about the example I showed at the beginning with the pave. If they have tested the path before spending all the money on the nice pathway, they, with 5 users, they could have known people would prefer the shorter path than, like, the big, nice, expensive path. So yeah, I think it would have like solved 100% of the problem in that case. So how did we, for the DOT project, how did we recruit participants? So what we did, we went to DOT lobby and waited there with coffee and donuts and waiting for applicants to come to apply for their permit. As a new team, we didn't have a lot of resource to find recruit users, and we don't know direct users because we are not permit technician. We are just helping the DOT special event team, and we didn't have enough time to find, like, reach one by one user and schedule all those things. So we just came up with this idea that, to find the right participant, there are no other perfect place than DOT lobby to find this user group. So we were waiting. There were like days that we couldn't find any participant. We don't know when they're coming. And even if they're coming, we don't know. One participant, like one person I remember, was in a so bad mood because she had to come, like, I think at that point 5 times, and she was just ripping paper. She was totally angry with the process. So we asked her, she's like, I'm not in a mood. So yeah, you never know if they're in a mood, they have the time, but we gotta try. So when we have done 3 testing and we decided to go by 3, there are a couple of reasons. These 3 participants had the almost exact same feedback that we got, and about the checklist testing. And they, even if we had 2 more participants have the best, feedback, we would have still gone with this result. When you have your participant data be based on what you are testing, um, try to collect some demographic. In our case, we collected age, gender, if they are first time or new organizer, and then what's their occupation and what they're applying for. These are applied, like, these are applicable for our testing. Based on what you need, you can just have more or less. One thing you are noticing that we didn't include the name just because the sake of privacy. There is no identifiable personal data that can be used to identify any participant. So you have your participant, you have your test plan. The key point here that as a facilitator you have to keep in mind, you cannot bias the person, you cannot ask any leading question, and basically you have to be just non-biased and just be an observer. It doesn't mean that you cannot be friendly. A friendly welcome is like you introduce yourself, tell them what it is, what you're trying to do, how their participant will help you to achieve the goal and improve the product, and then ask a series of open-ended questions. For example, in our case, we asked like how long they have been trying, like doing event organizing, what motivated them doing it. So people reveal so many insight from that, and if you know their motivation, that actually helps for the product too. So when you are actually giving the task, this is very important. Instead of asking them fill out the checklist, I'm just giving the example that I showed, give them context. If you just tell them fill out the checklist, they would be like, they will be focusing on checking the list. In our case, what we give them is a case scenario that as an event organizer, you wanna organize a block party. You want to have music, and then you want to find what are the fees and what you're going to do next. We didn't mention you have a checklist, fill out the checklist, because when you give this, like some of the terminology, it biases people. If I would, maybe checklist was not the thing they would have wanted, checklist was something that we thought that would be useful. So that's the reason I avoided that part, from biasing themselves from their, to understand their mental model. So again, these are some key things you have to remind: talk less, listen more. Um, Again, do not give statements or answers until they need help. So in our case, we really needed to help because the participant was not able to find what they needed. So until it's like required to finish the task, you can help them, but not at the beginning. And accept silence. Be comfortable with like having no conversation. It actually reveals a lot of the thought from the participant part. And always ask why. Never hesitate to ask why. Use that tool to know more. The other thing I would say, like, have some wouldn't like to be non-biased. There are different kind of biasness we have, like how we frame questions. So just keep in mind that, like, do not ask like direct yes no question. For example, if you have a rating question at the end, so your participant fill out all the questions and then you ask that, in a rate of 1 to 5, how happy are you, and how would you rate? And then you already bias them. You assume that they are happy, So just think mindful about asking questions and not bias the participant. A little bit about the notes. Again, I talk about it. If you don't have a note taker, you can do a couple of things. You can have a template for notes when you are asking questions to your participant and asking participant to perform the test. You can just use that template and just write down their observation. You can have a note taker, which you need an additional person. And if you are recording, of course, you can see this recording later on and take notes. That would require more time, but it's helpful revisiting the observation that you might miss. Quick resource for note template and other template testing plan. You guys can check usability.gov. That has a lot of template and really what you need for your to get started your usability testing. This testing, we had 3 scenarios. I already mentioned a little bit about it. First scenario was as an organizer, they have a block party with 300 people and they want music. How do they apply for that? And then second scenario was they wanted to find the initials for the event, what they would do to find the event fees. And the third one was that they know all the information they needed and what would they next. So we expected people will go question by question and check yes and no, and based on that they will download the rest of the form or the required document associated that point. But participant really didn't follow any pattern. They go back and forth, scrolling up and down, and also was skipping the questions didn't that didn't apply to them. For example, in this question, like, are you applying with a nonprofit partner? The first question. If I am applying with a nonprofit partner, I clicked yes. But if the question is your event a race, match, parade, or moving event, if that's not my event, I didn't click no. Because in what we have observed, that people, what they don't care to put effort to that. In UX we call it interaction cost. So clicking is an interaction cost. They don't want to spend that for the interaction. So when this is an example, not an observation, I just have an example with the task 3. And as you can see, when I put them in a digital format, I have in columns, I have participant A, B, and C. And also there the observation that I have, that I observed, and also added some code to empathize what they were feeling. And this code, remember coding, like if you add some codes, it would be really helpful for you to, when you're presenting the stakeholder or even like revisiting all those things later, it will help you to understand users' pain point, and you will immediately go to the point what you actually experienced during the testing. So now we have collected data by the usability testing. What's next? We have to analyze the data and see and make a report. So you can do the analysis in different way. In this case, we went by severity and frequency. Severity is something that if something stopping participant to do something, that's like the high severity. And if more than 30% participant was having that issue, that is like you mark that as a severe problem and you need to fix that in the next design. Moderate severity is something that is less friction. People struggle to do it, but they could do it. 11 to 29% participant might have that issue. That is a moderate severity. And the low is like, it's kind of, for example, annoyance, probably like people don't like one of the color, not necessarily accessibility issue. Someone didn't like a font. There are so many like tiny aesthetic thing people might have opinion. So that can go as a low. And when you have this severity, you can code each rating by color and group by theme of use. So in my case here, for all the participant, they expected the button at the bottom. I have it red because it's a theme, and it stopped them performing what they wanted to do. The yellow thing that I have like confused by some of the wordings, not all of the participants did have that, but like fair number, 11 to 29% had that problem. So that is moderate. So you have an idea here how to color code your theme so that whenever you create the report or even want to see like a bird's eye view, this helps a lot, like where to focus and what to talk about. And then when you documenting and reporting your findings, it's important to have some like what went well and what didn't go well. So the good and the bad. In our case, people like the good part was that everyone loved the idea of checklist. And I also have a code regarding that from a participant. And it seems helpful when understanding the requirements and gathering related information. The bad part was that it was difficult to figure out the next step. None of the participants didn't like find the button because it was not at the bottom, and they didn't know that they have to fill out, like click all of the questions and to reveal the button or to go to the next step. So the recommendation was improve the content, providing better structure and less word count, because people complained about how long the form is. And also the the biggest issue is reducing click. It was so many click, and we needed to do something about it. So the next step was work on content improvement, making a checklist iteration of design based on findings and recommendation, and collect user feedback on new version of the design. So what we did, when people go to this page, we broke down 25 list of checklists is now this. Like, people don't have to remember everything. We broke it down as first step, event information. For all special events, you need this. So we have people have to read this, have this document ready, and when they confirm that they have everything, they can go to the next. And in this case, we don't ask them, do you have this? Do you like, we ask them like to think from their event planning perspective. So I'm applying with a nonprofit, yes. And then my event is open to public or closed to public. If it's a public event, based on the public event, there are more options revealed. But if it's a closed event, private event, you don't even need to know the thing that related to the public event. That way we reduce the questions and remove the unnecessary things for the user, and they didn't have to click what they don't need. When you have all your document, you can just go to the online application form. You don't even have to go in person to the DOT. And the good thing is that we also introduce online payment. So now people don't have to go in person for paying the permit fee. So I hope that this case study helped you to understand, and it will help you to perform your test if you want to do the next test, if you have any questions. And thank you so much for listening and bearing with me.